Welcome to BevCam's production of Conversation with the Candidates. I'm John Maihos, your host for this segment. Today we'll be talking to Wes Slate, who's a candidate for mayor in the city of Beverly. Welcome, Wes, to the show. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thanks, John.
Well, we want to get right into things, so I just wanted to ask you, why are you running for office?
Running again. This will be my fourth election in a row. I've been on the city council for the last 6 years. 3 terms representing Ward 2, the downtown, the waterfront, and the Goat Hill neighborhood. And when Mayor Scanlon decided that he wasn't going to run again, it opened up the seat for the first time in about 18 years. A number of people considered running, and my opponent had run last time. But it seemed like a great opportunity to continue the work that I've done in Ward 2 and on the council as the council vice president this term to be the next mayor of Beverly. It's something that I've thought about doing for a long time, and opportunities like this don't come up that often. I don't think it'll be another 18 years, but you never know.
Wes, what do you think are the most pressing issues facing Beverly in the next few years?
Well, I think the new mayor that takes office in January certainly will have the 4 big projects ahead of him, namely the middle school, the Route 1A reconstruction, the waterfront, and also the Brimble Avenue interchange project, which is ongoing currently. There are other things that I'm particularly interested in, but I think those are the big projects that everyone's familiar with, and ironically that my opponent and I pretty much agree on in terms of the importance to the city and what we would do with them.
You mentioned 4 big issues, the middle school, Route 1A, the waterfront, and Brimble Avenue. If elected, what would be at the top of your agenda?
Well, I think the middle school, because of its critical nature to the school department and students in Beverly, the middle school is the last one of the schools that we have left to do. As you know, John, Beverly's and the mayor and the school committee and the council have put a lot of effort into redoing the elementary schools and more recently the high school that we're sitting in today. The middle school is the last one of those big school projects left to do, and that makes us unique among the communities around us to getting the schools physically in the shape that they need to be for students that are in them now. And also providing the programming that those students need in the buildings, because the buildings, after all, are just buildings.
For people who aren't familiar with you, what would you say your style is?
Well, my style. I've always enjoyed working with people. I'm the oldest of 4 children and used to being taking care of my younger siblings and also working with people. Every job I've ever had, from Stop and Shop was my first job, to driving a taxi cab. I ran a dormitory when I was a grad student. When I graduated from college, I became a teacher. That's how my wife Georgia and I met. We celebrated our 35th anniversary back in August.
Congratulations.
And, thank you. And then working in business since 1980 for the telephone company and more recently with Crane Electronics. Politics was also something I was always interested in. I came from a very political family, people that were very interested in politics, and talked about it a lot, argued about it fairly frequently, and really thought that political activities and government generally were how things got done in the community. So I thought about running for a long time, but never really had the opportunity when our son Richard was younger. As he got older and graduated from Beverly High School and then went on to Providence College, and also my job changed from the telephone company and a lot of travel to Crane, where I don't travel really at all. I live 2.5 miles from work and have time to put into it. And there was an open seat, as there is this year, on the council for ward council in Ward 2. And so I jumped at it and was successful. And as I said, I've been reelected two other times since then. So.
It's an interesting year because, like you said, the mayor's been in office for 18 years, a long time. How does a new person come in and change that culture, or is change necessary? How does that all work after such a long amount of time? There's going to be some type of an adjustment.
Sure. Well, my experience in business and just working, change is part of life, and although this one's taken a long time, I think the two things are that I mentioned earlier, that the new mayor is going to continue and should continue the success that Mayor Scanlon's had on those big projects, the four that I mentioned and some others that I'm sure we'll get to that I feel are important. But there's also a change in leadership style. None of us are identical in the way we manage or manage people. I think I tend to be more collaborative in the way I work with people. My training in business has encouraged me to do that, and I've seen it be successful. The mayor of Beverly, by charter, has a lot of power and responsibility, but no one person can run the city alone. It's a huge enterprise, $106 million budget this year that we passed on the council, about 1,000 employees that work for the city, 17 department heads that report to the mayor and that he chooses and the council confirms, and 9 labor unions. So you're by nature, and 40,000 residents, so you're roughly 40,000. So you're managing a big operation, and I think it's critical. And we tend to have to learn that lesson periodically to run the government in a way that's open and honest with people and includes them in the decision-making process to the point where public input is encouraged. And one thing that we've not done, and I'm sure we'll talk about this too, John, is using many varied communication channels to the public. In the past, it was enough to put an article in the newspaper, perhaps write a letter to the editor or a guest column, maybe appear on BevCam, and that pretty much covered it. That's not the way people get information now. We've learned in political campaigns and in governing, certainly in my time on the council, that you really have to reach out to people in multiple ways, including the internet, certainly, the website that the city has. But social media is critical, and not just to people our son's age and younger. Many people get their information in those ways. And one thing we've found in this campaign is that every individual person almost gets their information in a specific way. So you have to know, if I want to reach out to you, what's the best way to reach John Maihos? Is it by your cell phone or email or a text message or sending you a letter or calling you on the telephone? Which number do I use? Those are really critical things that I think I know the city can do better at, and I certainly would look to do that come January.
For anybody just tuning in, you're watching BevCam's productions of Conversations with the Candidates. I'm John Maihos, and I'm today with Wes Slate, a candidate for mayor in the city of Beverly. Wes, you mentioned that there's about a $106 million budget, and the city council and the mayor are responsible for making decisions for that budget. What specific skills do you feel that you have that qualifies you to participate in a budgeting process like that?
Sure. Well, I've done it 6 times, and the process that we go through is that the council, if you attend all the meetings and pay attention, the council really goes through that budget 3 separate times, in committee, at the public hearing, and then when the council finally votes on it. So if you multiply 6 times 3, personally I've gone through that budget 18 times. The budget that the mayor will pick up in January is the one that we voted in June. The fiscal year runs July 1st to June 30th. So I already know what's in that budget for this year. And the other piece of it is the new mayor, almost immediately after taking office in January, John, is going to have to start preparing the budget for next year. It starts with meetings with the department heads. I'm fortunate that I know all of them that are currently there. There might be some new ones or not. That's a whole other issue. But the familiarity comes from actually attending the meetings, paying attention, taking good notes, asking good questions, and I've done all of that. I've actually not been on the finance committee, but I've sat in on I think, all but one or two of their meetings over those 6 years. And if you pay attention to that document, which runs, it's a big binder, hundreds of pages with many lines of budget items, you really do become familiar with it. The first time is the hardest. And then after you've done it once or twice, you become familiar with the process and the people and a lot of the categories. And I mentioned taking good notes. I try to, and this was something that one of my predecessors suggested, make sure when you get the new budget book that you look at the old one and compare the notes from year to year so that the questions that you asked last year might be relevant this year and you transfer those. And that's something that I've done every year. I think it lends itself to being better informed and to answer your question, it really allows the new mayor, myself hopefully, to be real familiar with that budget in January.
We always hear the phrase fiscal responsibility. What's that mean to you?
Well, it's not my money. Well, the little piece of it that we pay, that Georgia and I pay in taxes certainly is part of it. But it's $106 million of the public's money, whether it comes in, the biggest chunk is real estate taxes, the second part is local aid from the state, but that's state taxes that come back to us. Excise taxes and some others are a much smaller part of the budget. So it's the people's money. And every vote that we take on that budget, whether it's in committee or in the public hearing or, excuse me, the final vote on the budget itself, you have to remind yourself that those have a direct impact, not just on yourself as a homeowner or a business owner, but on every single resident of Beverly or business owner in Beverly. And it's even though the economy has gotten a little bit better, and the mayor told us this year when he brought the budget in that it was the easiest one that he had done in the 18 years that he had been mayor, people are still hurting. The economy is still tough. The market is up and down. Real estate market's gotten a little better, but it's still tight, and the cost of doing business and borrowing money is still there. So we have to be mindful of that and be conscious of the fact that not just for people on fixed incomes or people that are unemployed or underemployed, but everyone feels a pinch. When we raise taxes, it hits everybody. And if you're conscious of that every time you take that vote, I think you'll do the right thing.
Well, balancing the budget. What are the critical factors in balancing the budget? What are kind of the leverage points?
Well, by law, the budget has to be balanced. We can't, unlike the federal government, which can print money, both local government and state government have to have a budget balanced, in our case, by the end of June, to go to the state so we can set the tax rate in the fall. We cannot submit an unbalanced budget. But the way to do that is to manage those probably 80 to 85% of the costs that are in the budget that are fixed by contract, by negotiation, the expenses of running the city, which leaves you that 15 to 20% to do everything else that you want to do and the people want you to do in the city. I make the analogy when I go out and talk to people about this that it's really not that much different, although it's a larger pot of money, than what you do in your home or with your own business. That you have a certain amount of income every month, you have expenses every month, you have things that you must do, things that you'd like to do, things that you should do, and you have to make choices among those things every single week or month or whenever you do your budget personally. The city's no different, and the mayor, as the top person in city government, has to make those policy decisions on a constant basis, informing the budget and managing the budget. And the other thing is, just like in life, you have unforeseen expenses that come along where in the middle of the budget year you have a hit that comes in from the state or on special education or on a disaster or something else that you did not anticipate, did not necessarily plan for, and you have to accommodate that. So it's a complicated process, but it's one that I'm familiar with from business and my time on the council, and I'm confident I can do it as mayor.
What do you think the top 2 or 3 budget issues are for the next 2 years?
Well, I mentioned those 4 big projects, but I'll tell you what my other priorities would be. I think that the city, when I compare my business experience to the way the city operates, not just Beverly, but local government in general, I think our information technology, our IT infrastructure is not where it should be. And I don't just mean in the use of laptops and personal digital assistants and iPhones and the rest, but the way that people manage information, the way the city manages information, and the way citizens interact with the city, both residents and businesses. We have not, I don't think, invested in the technology the way my business has and the telephone company did before. And when you compare us to other communities in the use of the website and the way people can do business with us, we're not where we need to be. The other piece of it is when you walk into City Hall and you look at the tools that the people that work for the city have to work with that networking setup and the computers, that's a big thing. That I sometimes think of it as the land that time forgot, in the sense that the technology is not being made use of. It probably won't ever be to the level that business is, but it can be better than it is. The other part is the representing most of the downtown, as I do in Ward 2, one of the unique aspects to Beverly among our sister communities, the creative arts community, Montserrat College of Art, all the creative people that we have that live and work in the city and run businesses in the city. And the city's been pretty good in supporting that effort, in encouraging development in the downtown and that creative arts community, the college and the rest. But I think we can do more, and I think we can set a tone for a welcoming environment for artists and creative people in the city of Beverly that's unique among our sister communities that we can't compete on in other ways. Excuse me, the waterfront I mentioned earlier is a big one. We just got some great news today that as we tape this, we're expecting very soon a decision to be made on the Black Cow restaurant by the appeals court anytime soon. And parallel to that, the city's been negotiating with the owner of the Black Cow restaurant for a lease of that city property for the use as a restaurant. That's a big issue for people that are interested in the waterfront. Frankly, it's one that I was asked about the first year I ran 7 years ago, 6-7 years ago. And I think we'll have, as we're taping this and as this show is broadcast, I think there'll be some good developments happening on that will be having even more progress, so that once that decision is made by the court, the city will be able to move quickly on that and get that waterfront in the condition that it should be, so that we can have a waterfront restaurant to complement all the work that's already been done down there, and much more.
The pilot program, or payment in lieu of taxes, what are your views on pilot?
Well, I actually I served with former Councilor Judith Cronin, who really did a terrific job on that committee. I believe it was our second term on the council. Judith and I came on at the same time. On that committee, we had the two of us and a number of citizen volunteers who approached every single nonprofit in the city. There are many. Everybody thinks of the colleges and the hospital and the big ones, but it goes to the Masonic Lodge and the service organizations, the social clubs, churches, different organizations, Boy and Girl Scouts and others that are not by law required to pay taxes. It's state law and federal law. There has been a movement to ask those organizations that can to contribute to some of the services they receive by being in the city. And I'm happy to report that the colleges certainly, and the hospital and some others, the Housing Authority, are doing that. Is it enough? If you go at it from the point of view that by law they're not required to pay anything, anything they do give us is voluntary and much appreciated. Could they do more? Could some that could afford to do more do so? I think so. Frankly, I think it's been a more so for bigger cities, Boston certainly, and other cities where much more of the land is occupied by nonprofit organizations. It's been more of an issue than it has been for us. I think we've been pretty good about maintaining a positive relationship with those organizations that really do contribute a lot to the community and in very tangible ways. And when they're able to, give us some dollars, and that's always good. And other things, scholarships and in-service training and things like that.
I want to talk about development in Beverly, but before
Sure.
I do, want to remind people that you're watching another edition of Conversations with the Candidates, a BevCam production. I'm John Maihos, your host for this segment, and I'm with Wes Slate, a candidate for mayor in the city of Beverly. Tell me, Wes, what's your overall view on the need or potential for development in Beverly?
Well, development in the areas that is properly zoned and where it makes sense is the way that we generate so-called new growth, which allows us to go beyond the cap, the 2.5% cap on the budget. By state law, and it's been in effect for many years, we're limited to increasing the budget by only 2.5% a year from year to year. It's no secret to anybody, certainly not to me, having served for 6 years, that our fixed costs and our contracts tend to exceed that number. And at the same time, the state aid, that local aid that I mentioned earlier, has diminished considerably. It dropped precipitously in 2002. It's gone up a little bit every year, but it's still not back at that level. So development and new growth allows us to add some additional revenue. The mayor's generally budgeted for about $1 million more in revenue in the budget from new growth, from taxes on new property, building permits, and the like. And that's frankly what allows us to do some of the things that the budget otherwise would not accommodate. And there are many of those. I'll just list a couple quickly that I think we're really I mentioned the IT infrastructure earlier. We are sorely lacking in staffing in some of the key departments, the police department, the fire department, public services or public works, the school department, not so much in the classrooms and class size, although that can be a problem, but in support services, in the IT people that support the teachers and the other support services that they need in the classroom in their individual schools. A teacher that I met door knocking a couple of weeks ago that teaches at one of the elementary schools told me that if she were at the high school, for example, there are IT people or a help desk right here in this building at the high school where we tape this. But in her school, if she needs help with the smart board in her classroom or the computer in her classroom, she has to call and if she can't fix it herself or figure it out herself, she has to call and get some help, and that may take a while, or she may have to wait until somebody comes around to her school later in the week. And with her students sitting there waiting, she has primary age kids, young kids, in the class looking up at her like, what are we going to do now? She has to be prepared to do that. As a former teacher, I understand that. You know, you always had to be prepared with a backup lesson, but that's not a situation a trained teacher should have to deal with. We should be able to provide the kind of support she does. And those other departments, both chiefs, current and former, have been very clear in the fact, as has the Commissioner of Public Services, that they just don't have the number of people that they need to do the things that everyone expects them and needs them to do.
What are the issues that need to be considered in your mind when you evaluate a development project or development in general?
Well, I think we've gotten a good lesson in that in the Brimble Avenue interchange that we mentioned earlier, John. It's a very difficult and complicated project. The two, I think, misconceptions in the vote that the council is taking on it were that the council is somehow the ultimate authority on all things that happen in Beverly, almost like the Supreme Court of the Emperor. And we're not at all. We do have certain authority on the budget and other things, but we don't override or overrule other boards and commissions that are independent and provide us information on areas of their own expertise. The particular issue that's before us was very limited in scope, and it's important for people to understand that that's really what we're voting on. But I think the larger question of development is one that has to be considered with the people, the neighbors and the businesses that are most affected by it. Traffic is always an issue. Coming from Ward 2, I certainly understand that Most of the issues that I've had with constituents have come up because of parking and traffic issues, and that's true in the downtown area generally and in other parts of the city. So that's a big consideration. We're very fortunate that the Parking and Traffic Commission that advises us and gets involved in those issues with the Planning Board and the Council has some very experienced citizen volunteers, two of whom are traffic engineers by training, along with representatives from fire and police and planning and the Chamber of Commerce and others, to advise us on those issues. And they are very, I've attended many of their meetings, parking and traffic, and they're very good at evaluating that aspect of it. I'm sure they will do that with Brimble when it comes to them through the Planning Board if the developer moves forward with some actual plans for what he's going to do.
In your mind, what are the real possibilities of Beverly being a tourist spot, kind of like Salem, Newburyport, Gloucester?
I'll be honest, John, we get compared to Salem all the time. Mayor Driscoll and I over there, I know her quite well, and we joke about this. I think a lot of it comes from the natural rivalry between the two cities, the Thanksgiving Day game and the sports rivalries. I know when our son played sports, soccer and lacrosse, the Salem games were always very competitive, and there was a real strong feeling there. Salem has some aspects to it. The historic nature of the city, the maritime history, the museum, which is a world-class museum. The witches, we're in the month of October. You either enjoy going to Salem or you avoid Salem for the month of October because there's so much going on there. And some of the other you mentioned tourism aspects of the reason that people go to Salem as a destination. I don't see us being able to compete with that. What I do see is that we have a waterfront that is comparable to Salem's if we can get that restaurant built and do some other creative things with the property on the other side of the bridge, the old Ventron property, which is starting to get some attention again, I'm happy to say. It's been dormant for pretty much the whole time I've been on the council. And also, I mentioned that creative arts economy. We are, except for the museum, the Peabody Essex Museum being in Salem, we are unique in having Montserrat College of Art, the creative arts economy, and a lot of creative people who live and work in Beverly and attract business and people and residents and activities to the city. Beverly Main Streets, as you know, for example, has done a terrific job, not just with Arts Fest and New Year's Eve and some of the other activities, but with the block parties and sponsoring community events in the downtown area. Most of their geographical area sits in Ward 2, so I've been very active as a volunteer with that organization. Don't agree with them on everything, but have certainly been supportive of those activities. And I think if we take advantage of that and if the city takes the lead in promoting those activities in support of the organizations that do them, I think we can attract more people to Beverly and get them to spend some of their tourist dollars over here. If Salem's too crowded, they're welcome in Beverly.
I've got a laundry list for you. What are your thoughts on the following development issues and projects? We've talked a lot about the Toza Road Route 128 project. What do you see as the pros and cons of the project?
Well, I think if, excuse me, if the entire project can be completed and it's done to improve the traffic in that area, not just around the music theater. That's a particular problem when their shows are starting and ending. But just the traffic in that part of the city generally. I don't live in that part of the city nor represent it, but I work in North Beverly. I work on Toza Road for Crane. And so I'm very familiar with the traffic in that area, and that's definitely an issue that needs to be addressed. And I think the entire Brimble Avenue interchange project, as it goes through the process, can address that.
Proceed as proposed?
Well, for now, the one issue that we have before us, once the council deals with that, I think then it will be up to the developer and the state to move forward with that first phase. And I know this mayor and the next mayor will be working hard to get the second phase of it on the Dunham Road side to proceed as well. They're really integrated. They had to be split because of the way the money's coming from the state.
Former McKay School. It's been sitting empty for years. What would you do?
Try to sell it. Any developer that takes it on is going to have a big cleanup. All of those old elementary schools, my own back in Connecticut, asbestos was the miracle material that was used for insulation in all of them. That's got to be cleaned up. But the building is sound, and the other elementary schools that we've sold off with declining enrollment over the years have been reused in great ways. I think that would also happen with Briscoe when we do the middle school project. So the market just hasn't been there to support it so far, but the mayor's continuing to push that, and I would as well.
We talked about the waterfront. What needs to be done to develop the waterfront? How high a priority should it be?
It's an asset that we have. It should be a major priority. I mentioned it's one of the very first things and the major thing I was asked the first time I ran. The restaurant's key to it. The rest of the work down there, with the exception of the walkway around the bridge, has been completed already. Once the Ventron property is done along with that, and hopefully some of the abutters will take the lead on improving their properties as well. It's something that we have that many other communities would love to have. I'd love to see it done, and would work hard to do that.
New police station, new fire station, how high a priority in your mind, and what are the options?
Well, I mentioned staffing levels in those departments, John. I'll tell you, having been in those stations, the fact that we ask the people that work for police and fire and public services also down at the garage on Park Street to work in the facilities they have is really unfortunate. We've made a decision, as I said earlier, to invest in the schools, and that means that some of those other public facilities have really gone are really in bad shape, and they need to be done. The people that do those jobs should be working out of first-class facilities, and hopefully once the middle school project is on board and the school debt from the earlier projects is off the books, we can proceed with, and we have some new growth, we can proceed with either a combined or separate public safety facility and also deal with public services. The mayor's got that in his capital expenditure plan, and I would continue that.
Well, you mentioned schools. In your opinion, what are the biggest challenges that face the Beverly school system?
Well, leadership is a big one. We have a terrific interim superintendent, Dr. Argenziano. Very experienced, terrific guy. I accompanied him, the mayor, and the school committee president and the state rep to the MSBA vote on the middle school recently, and had some time to spend with him. And he's also, in addition to running the district, kind of coordinating the search for a new superintendent who will then choose a new assistant superintendent, because both of them retired at the end of the school year, and that sets the tone for the whole district. I said to the superintendent that I think one characteristic he should be looking for, and the search committee should be looking for, is a really dynamic leader to represent the school district. It's fine to be up on MCAS scores and the nuts and bolts of buildings and grounds and the budget and all the rest of it, but you're the #1 advocate for the school district. As a former teacher, and married to a teacher and many educators in my family, my extended family, that superintendent role is critical. I think that's the #1 thing. Support services, I mentioned, and continuing to provide good instruction to the students at all levels of ability. It's a big laundry list.
Should the mayor-elect be involved with the selection of the new superintendent?
I've said to the mayor personally and publicly and privately that as a candidate, I've expressed my opinion as a candidate and an individual citizen on a number of issues. That's one, selection of a new police chief and others going forward. I think once the election is settled in just a few weeks, and if I'm the mayor-elect, or when I'm the mayor-elect, then I said to the mayor, I think the dynamic would have changed, and I would expect to have a stronger voice in any decisions that are made. He is still the mayor until January and will be until the new mayor is sworn in. But once the election is held and I'm successful, I would certainly look to be a stronger voice for how I think things should be done between now and then.
And how do you plan to work with the new superintendent?
Well, the mayor's a member of the school committee, as you know. I do not believe that the mayor should be inspecting schools and visiting classrooms unannounced. I didn't like that when I was a teacher. I think there's a protocol to be observed with anyone doing that. I think you're intimately involved in the school committee's policy decisions, selection and evaluation of the superintendent, and decisions on the policies. And stick to that. Certainly, I'd be interested. I served as liaison to the school committee for 2 of my 3 terms. Sat in many of their meetings on finance and facilities, which is where the real budget work is done. So I would be an active participant in the school committee, but not overstep my role as a policy person and not an administrator.
If you can believe it, we're almost out of time. I have one final question for you. What would you answer to viewers who ask, why should I vote for you? Why should I entrust the management of the city to you? And you can use the final 2 minutes of the show to wrap up.
Well, I actually have a prepared statement, John, which I'll read, and I need my glasses to do it. I thank you, and thanks to BevCam for once again hosting conversations with the candidates. On Tuesday, November 5th, voters in Beverly will choose a new mayor, city council, and school committee to serve the next 2 years, beginning in January. Bill Scanlon is not on the ballot for the first time in almost 20 years, so someone else will be sworn in as mayor then. Since early June, and really for the last 6 years as a councilor, I've been preparing to be that person. The mayor of Beverly does not occupy a ceremonial post, one that should be a stepping stone to higher office or more lucrative work outside government, nor even a job where one can have staff who shield one from the public so he can concentrate on the fun parts of the job. Our charter and the expectations of our citizens require that the mayor be a hands-on manager, well-versed in business, negotiations, and contracts, politically savvy and connected, and of course deeply committed to the Garden City by choice and not necessarily by accident of birth. I believe that I am that person. If I did not, I would not have relinquished a safe seat as Ward 2 councilor, a job that I've loved doing every day for the last 6 years, to take on an uphill fight, a tough battle against a savvy political operator who has been elected citywide before this. I'm confident that I can do it, and I'm excited by the prospect of doing it. But don't take my word for it. Listen to the endorsements I've received recently from Mayor Scanlon himself, who knows the realities of the job better than anyone, having served longer than any previous Beverly mayor. From the North Shore Labor Council, representing 45 labor unions throughout our region, 15,000 members strong, 1,100 of whom live here in Beverly. From my colleagues on the council and the school committee, current and past, who have worked with me on some of the tough issues we've done over the last 6 years. Paul Guanci, Maureen Trubateras, Kevin Hoban, Scott Hausman, and others. From constituents in my ward and throughout the city whom I've helped over the years. And from our friends and neighbors who have gotten to know Georgia and me since we moved here in 1982, and Richard being born here the following year. I have a vision for Beverly, not as a magical place where everyone is involved in every decision and the doors of City Hall are thrown open. Those things are given in any democracy. But rather where government is big enough to be efficient, but small enough to listen and learn from everyone who wishes to be involved, which uses our $106 million budget wisely, efficiently, and openly, making full use of all the various communication channels that our citizens use today, not just legal notices in the papers, but all the others. We are poised for greatness in this city that we love, and our potential is limited only by our willingness to embrace that potential, to go big or go home. I would ask people to please attend one of the many debates and community discussions, to watch BevCam and campaign and other political events where I'll be every day until Election Day. Look me up on the web at www.wesslate.com, on Facebook and Twitter, and the papers and campaign materials you'll be receiving. And please vote on November 5th. Your vote is critical to the future direction of the city. Now we'll see who's got it. And thank you very much. And thank you, John.
And thank you, Wes. It's about all the time we have. We'd like to thank our guest, Wes Slate, who's running for mayor for the city of Beverly. My name is John Maihos, on behalf of BevCam, thanks for joining us.